Protection Paladins are in one of their best states ever right now. They're the number 2 most popular tank in raids, and number 2 in Mythic Plus. They may not be the consensus number 1 tank in the game right now, that's Demon Hunter, but you could make a pretty convincing argument that Paladin is actually the all-around best. Regardless of whether you think they are the best tank in the game, you cannot deny Protection Paladin's group utility. No one else in the game is doing it like Prot Pallies right now. They have an unprecedented level of defensive group utility, more than most healers. They have amazing control over caster mobs with a seemingly limitless supply of ranged silences, and they have the strongest tank cooldown toolkit that has ever existed in WoW. Not even BFA Prot Warrior was operating at this level. Hi, it's Llarold, and today I'm going to talk about how to play Protection Paladin in Dragonflight patch 10.2.5. Since it is the middle of the season, this will be specifically oriented toward Mythic Plus, and with that being said, let's just get right into it. First off, Prot Pally's good. It's good at everything. So under strengths, I just wrote the word yes, but that's probably not descriptive enough, so let's actually talk about some strengths. First off, they have an absolutely absurd defensive toolkit. They have the strongest defensive cooldowns in the game, they have more defensive cooldowns than anyone else. How much does one class need? Establishing threat at the start of pulls on a paladin is very easy now, even without cooldowns due to Avenger's Shield and Tyr's Enforcer, but having cooldowns like Eye of Tyr, Divine Toll, and Wings, of course, makes it all trivial. You're able to perform most of your rotation from range, which makes dealing with enemies who jump around or situations where you have to move an enemy out of a pool or you have to move out of melee range easy to deal with. Paladin's burst AoE damage is excellent, which is great for burning through big packs of enemies in the most difficult parts of dungeons. Prot Paladin's group utility is kind of unprecedented. There is no replacement for what Paladins can do. Lots of other classes have imitators. Consider Death Knight's amazing grips, and Demon Hunter's pretty good Sigil of Chains, Paladin's Avenger's Shield, and Demon Hunter's Sigil of Silence. No other class has anything approaching the value of Blessing of Sacrifice when it comes to helping party members stay alive. If this was all that Paladins had, as a tank, it would still set them apart from the pack. But it's not all they have. They have Blessing of Protection, Spell Warding, Freedom, Lay on Hands, Cleanse Toxins, and a massive amount of spot healing with Word of Glory. Now let's jump into Prot Pally's weaknesses. There aren't many. Consecration is far and away the part about Paladin that the players dislike most. Because it is so strong and you are tuned around standing in Consecration, this means you have a compulsory need to recast it whenever you move. This can be very annoying. Even so, it is a Bark Skin or Demoralizing Shout level defensive bonus that you can maintain close to 100% uptime. And the fact that Prot Paladin players, of which I am one, find the time to complain about this is a testament to just how blessed this class's life is. Paladin is the class that has been smiled on by Blizzard throughout Dragonflight. Complaining about Consecration is like complaining about how your Ferrari gets bad gas mileage. Shut up, man. All of the warriors are tired of hearing Paladins complain about how annoying their amazing defensive toolkit is, but we can't be stopped. That's right, I'm a Paladin main now. My Paladin is over 489 item level. I guess I'm just officially a Paladin. Single target damage. Prot Pally's single target damage is not very good in Mythic Plus. That's not really a huge problem. It's almost entirely a raid issue. And finally, keybind weight. There is a massive number of keybinds required. With great power comes great responsibility. Paladin has a ton of keybinds to manage, but unlike Brewmaster Monk or Blood DK, it's not a big batch of rotational keybinds. The Paladin rotation is actually pretty tight and simple. It's a really easy class to play. The utility keybinds are where the issue lies. You have Blessing of Protection and Blessing of Spell Warding, which require 2 separate binds. You have Blessing of Freedom, Blessing of Sacrifice, Lay on Hands, Word of Glory, Cleanse Toxins. You can also spec into more skills like Turn Evil or Repentance to deal with incorporeal adds, and that adds even more keybind pressure onto an already keybind heavy class. Now let's talk about affixes. Paladins are one of the strongest specs at dealing with Mythic Plus affixes. I would say they are not quite on the level of Bear Druid, but they're almost right there. You can spec into Turn Evil and Fear incorporeal enemies. It's pretty annoying, I have to say, but it is good for the safety of the group to have yet another person who can handle that mechanic as needed. You can very easily dispel afflicted NPCs. You can spec into Unbound Freedom and cast Freedom on your healer every time Entangling pops up, and that will clear both of you without having to move. It also grants move speed, so it's pretty good for quality of life when you're just running around inside of dungeons. You can't really slow Spiteful ads, but you can just help AoE them down, and maybe heal or sack the players they're targeting. The same goes for Bursting and Bolstering. You can't mechanically deal with those directly, but you can help heal and use defensive cooldowns on party members to help mitigate the effects of those affixes. Sanguine is the one problem affix for paladins. You can use Avenger's Shield to silence casters who are standing in Sanguine, and you can perform nearly all of your rotation from range, so you can keep hitting enemies while moving them out of Sanguine pools, but in terms of actually knocking enemies out of the pools, you don't have anything. Okay, now let's talk about tier set bonuses. Pally's tier set bonuses in Season 3 are annoying, but numerically they're pretty good. Let's just read through them first. The 2-piece makes it so that Judgment grants a stack of Sanctification. Sanctification reduces your damage taken by 2% per stack, and it goes up to 5 stacks. When you hit 5 stacks, your next Consecration cast will be empowered, doing triple damage and healing, and getting 30% larger radius. When Empowered Consecration ends, your Sanctification stacks will reset. Now, Empowered Consecration can end one of two ways. It can time out, 14 seconds pass and it ends, or you can recast Consecration, and that really is the problem with this tier set bonus, is that you can drop an Empowered Consecration and need to move and need to redrop Consecration, and there goes all of your stacks. The 4-piece bonus makes it so that while you're inside of that Empowered Consecration, which adds a lot more weight onto that 2-piece already, your abilities have a chance to deal 40% bonus damage or healing as fire. You can maintain about 40 to 45% uptime on that 5-stack 2-piece bonus if you're standing still, not having any situation, or just managing it well, not having any situations where you're having to like drop it and then immediately move. Consecration is about 8 to 10% of your total damage in AoE without the tier set bonuses, so the 2-piece bonus is gonna boost your damage by about 6 to 8% more damage. That's pretty good. Not bad for a 2-piece anyway. I think I get about 8 to 10% more damage in AoE through the 4-piece bonus as well, looking through logs, and this is pretty decent. In single target, these numbers are lower. They're about half as effective, and getting 8 to 10% more damage from both tier set bonuses combined is fairly disappointing, but that's really more of a rate issue, and again, I think it's okay. There's also the damage reduction that it provides, which stacks up to 10%, and during the Empowered Consecration, it stays at the full 10% that whole time. This means you're averaging around 6 or 7% damage reduction from this tier set, which is pretty good. The biggest problem with this tier set is Paladin's 1 Consecration at a time limit. If you recast Consecration during an Empowered Consecration, it overwrites the Empowered Consecration, the buff is removed, all that stuff. You really have to be careful not to overwrite your Consecration cast during the 2-piece procs, and that's pretty annoying. I've spent the last several months dealing with these set bonuses, getting more comfortable with them, and I am now, but I will be happy to see them go when Season 4 comes around. I don't actually think they're bad. I know a lot of Paladin players have really hated these tier set bonuses, but for me, I think they're fine. They're okay. They're all right as an inconvenience for a few months, but once they're gone, I am not gonna miss them. Didn't hate them though. Now let's talk about talents, and I only have one main talent set up to consider here, but I do have several minor swaps to deal with affixes and just kind of to account for personal preference. Alright, this is the standard Mythic Plus talent setup for Protection Paladin, and I just kind of want to show off some of the little things you can tweak here and there to help deal with different Mythic Plus affixes and so on. So taking punishment is sort of an optional node. It does make it so that getting interrupts, either with Rebuke or with Avenger Shield, will cast free Blessed Hammers, and those Blessed Hammers, just like a regular Blessed Hammer, will generate Holy Power and, deal damage and stuff. So it's pretty nice to have this, but it's not mandatory. You can drop this in favor of Unbound Freedom on Entangling weeks, or Turn Evil on Incorporeal weeks. I think that's okay. I always take Cleanse Toxins just as a default. I take Cleanse Toxins. It's really good to have that dispel whenever you need it, and it's really bad to not have it when you need it, and I would rather need it or have it and not need it than need it and not have it. and getting down to blinding light, which is kind of mandatory. Like even on afflicted, or I'm sorry, on corporeal weeks, I wouldn't drop blinding light to take repentance. I would just, I mean, the cast time is 1.2 seconds. The cast time of turn evil is actually faster. I'd rather have turn evil and still keep blinding light, right? So kind of a no-brainer there. I have seen some really helpful rep pally spec into both during incorporeal weeks, and that's pretty cool, but I'd rather keep blinding light for that AoE CC potential. Now, in terms of other stuff you can tweak, one of the really amazing things about Prop Pally is that you get all of your capstone nodes very easily in the class tree, which is kind of crazy. And also something that I think sometimes people don't know about is Seal of Order down here. You know, this got reworked. This whole line of Dusk and Dawn got reworked very early on in the expansion to not suck so much. And basically it made it so that your holy power generating abilities will cool down 10% faster. If you're doing your rotation correctly, normally, that'll basically just always be up. And that actually applies to Divine Toll. So it will shave 6 seconds off of the base cooldown of Divine Toll. So you'll have a 54-second Divine Toll by default if you're just generating and spending holy power normally. And that's pretty great. Divine Toll is pretty nice. If I had a point at something that I don't really love, I would really rather use Quickened Invocation. I wish this were the preferred option, 45-second base Divine Toll cooldown instead of the getting 3 free Avenger Shields, but there's just no way around it. 3 free Avenger Shields that come after Divine Toll is better for interrupting, better for maintaining AoE threat, and better for like damage and shielding. Like it is also just a damage increase to get those free Avenger Shields and AoE, more damage out of pressing the 1 keybind, the 1 Divine Toll. I just kind of like the shorter cooldown. I always like shorter cooldowns, right? And you know, it's just sort of a tuning issue, but as it currently stands, Divine Resonance is definitely the better option. I wish Divine Purpose were like a viable alternative. I did use this in Mythic Farrak early progression, first 100 pulls or so, just to give myself a lot more free Word of Glory casts. I really needed it. But unfortunately, at the current state of damage tuning and so on, this is just not a viable option at all. I really do miss it though. Divine Purpose, fun talent, wish it would come back. And finally, Zealot's Paragon. Zealot's Paragon just adds like a lot of extra time onto your Sentinel, and then just a bunch of damage onto your Hammer of Wrath and Judgment, just 10% more damage onto them all the time. So even just getting like 2, 3, 4 seconds of added Sentinel time from this is like completely worth it. You're not going to pick up anywhere close to that much damage in this tree. Other than that, it's pretty great. The only other talent in here that I think is maybe optional, I don't really think it is, Sacrifice of the Just. You never see anybody at the high level drop this because it is so crucial for staying alive, but if you're just doing like 20, mid 20 keys, you can drop Sacrifice of the Just, go from that 1 minute base or 1 minute Blessing of Sacrifice back up to the base of 2 and run Lightforge Blessing instead. Lightforge Blessing will give a lot of healing to the group just for doing your normal rotation. Each time you shield the righteous, you're going to heal other people. It's not as good. It's sort of like having a healing stream totem. It's a very small trickle of healing over the course of, well, a whole dungeon. It's definitely not going to be the thing that saves somebody's life under most circumstances. Whereas Blessing of Sacrifice could be, but if you're not making good use of the Blessing of Sacrifice, you know, if you're not using Blessing of Sacrifice often enough to justify the Sacrifice of the Just, then you might be better off just taking Lightforge Blessing in the first place. In the right hand tree, there's not a lot of wiggle room. The only real thing that I would want to pick up here would be Inspiring Vanguard, and there's really not any talents that I would want to give up to get that. I don't want to give up Final Stand. I don't want to give up Inmost Light. Certainly that's a bunch of damage. Bulwark of Righteous Fury is a ton of damage. Righteous Protector and Resolute Defender are massive amounts of cooldown reduction. Sanctified Wrath is a massive increase to damage output, makes your Sentinel, your wings, that much stronger. I have seen some people run Avenging Wrath Might if they're really not threatened by the content that they're tanking. You could do that. I think you're kind of maybe the same boat with Gift of the Golden Valkyr. It is such a good defensive lifeline talent, but if you're not challenged defensively by the content you're doing, you could take Inspiring Vanguard and get a little bit more extra damage, or actually a decent amount of extra damage throughout the entire dungeon. And I think that would be pretty justifiable. I wouldn't give up Barricade of Faith though. Barricade of Faith adds a lot of block chance, really adds a ton of damage reduction, and I mean, not a ton of damage, but a little bit of damage throughout the course of a dungeon thanks to Holy Shield. For the most part, this right-hand tree is really set in stone, really locked in. Like so many of these talents, Seal of Reprisal. I would love if it added a lot of damage, but Blessed Hammer does absolutely no damage. 3k damage a hit, 20% more of nothing is still nothing. Bastion of Light getting 3 Shield of the Righteous casts at the start of a pull on a 2-minute cooldown. Pretty decent in raid situations, but in Mythic Plus, nah, not really so great. There's so much time in between pulls to just do this number right here. Tap, 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 Shield of the Righteous, and then I'm walking into melee range and throwing out an Avenger Shield, and I already have a couple of seconds of Shield of the Righteous still up. I don't feel that Bastion of Light, as much as I like it as a talent, I don't feel that it is worth just like sacrificing some of these amazing defensive layers like Final Stand and Gift of the Golden Valkyr, or all of these incredible offensive layers like Bulwark of Righteous Fury and Most Light, that kind of thing, to get this very occasional small defensive cooldown. Now let's talk about abilities. The fundamentals of the Paladin rotation are to maintain Consecration, keep Avenger Shield and Judgment on cooldown, and use Hammer of Wrath when it's available. Once you've done all that, you want to spend your Holy Power on Shield of the Righteous without ever letting that Holy Power overcap. Cast Word of Glory to heal yourself or others as needed so that no one dies, and once you've got all of that covered, you can use Blessed Hammer as filler. Maintaining both Shield of the Righteous and Consecration is very important for staying alive. It is a #1 priority while tanking. You never want to let your Holy Power overcap. It's better to use Shield of the Righteous when you already have a lot of time remaining on it than to ever let Holy Power go over the cap. Spending Holy Power reduces the cooldowns on most of your major defensive cooldowns and offensive cooldowns for that matter, so building and spending as quickly as you can all the time is almost always the right approach. Word of Glory is your main heal. It's a heal. You use it when you need healing, but you can also use it to heal other players who are in danger. And that is the real, the thing that kind of separates somebody who's getting the hang of the class and somebody who's operating at an expert level, is knowing when you can put that heal into other players and then doing so as quickly as you can and saving lives. You get a free Word of Glory cast every 3 times you use Shield of the Righteous, which means that it's usually available for free when you need it. You generally only want to use it when it's free, but if it's a choice of life and death, you can choose life and heal yourself. Just beware that healing yourself instead of maintaining Shield of the Righteous is a pretty quick path to being auto-attacked to death in a couple of seconds later, so keep maintaining Shield of the Righteous first and foremost, and healing yourself with the free Word of Glory procs. You have a few really good offensive cooldowns and a big batch of amazing defensive cooldowns, so let's go over those now. Avenging Wrath is your main offensive and defensive cooldown, and you will usually spec into Sentinel in Mythic Plus. As Sentinel, it grants damage reduction, maximum health, increased holy power generation, and increased damage. It lasts for about 30 to 35 seconds per cast with an average cooldown of around 75 to 80 seconds, so the uptime is pretty amazing considering how much this cooldown does. Eye of Tyr is a 45-second cooldown that deals a big burst of AoE damage. It grants 25% damage reduction for 9 seconds. It's a cooldown on the level of Demoralizing Shout or Bark Skin, but it also gives you a burst AoE damage cooldown over the top of that defensive value, and this makes it great for securing threat at the start of pulls, but also giving yourself a cooldown at the start of pulls. It really is a well-made skill. Divine Toll is an AoE burst damage skill that's great for 2 really useful purposes throughout dungeons. You can use it just at the start of pulls to establish threat, that's always great, but you can also hold on to it and use it to specifically interrupt multiple casters at once. Effectively, Divine Toll is just 5 Avenger shields at once, but each one also generates 1 Holy Power, which makes it really helpful for getting Shield of the Righteous up at the start of pulls when you're a little weaker. It is a really weak skill in single target situations though. It basically is just 1 Avenger shield. It does generate 1 Holy Power, but you know, that's still not great in single target. But in AoE, this is one of the best cooldowns in the game, and it's only a 1-minute cooldown. Pretty amazing. Now let's talk about defensive cooldowns. You have Ardent Defender, which is your first lifeline in terms of defensive cooldowns. It is a 2-minute base cooldown, and Resolute Defender grants it cooldown reduction, so it is a lot closer to 80 seconds in practice. It grants a small amount of base damage reduction as well, only 20%, but it gives you an active cheat death effect, which is very powerful for dealing with big boss abilities or enraged enemies, very buffed enemies in certain parts of dungeons. Just a very powerful defensive cooldown. You have Guardian of Ancient Kings, which is a straightforward shield wall. You just use it to mitigate huge chunks of damage. The base cooldown is 5 minutes, but thanks to Righteous Protector, the average cooldown is more like 3 minutes to 3.5. You get a reactive Guardian of Ancient Kings cast when your health drops below 35% thanks to Gift of the Golden Valkyr as well, which has the astonishingly short 45-second cooldown attached to it. You also get a bit of extra cooldown reduction whenever you use Avenger's Shield thanks to that talent as well. So in AoE heavy situations, the cooldown on Guardian of Ancient Kings can realistically be under 3 minutes, which is pretty good for a shield wall. You have Blessing of Sacrifice, which is an external cooldown you could use on other players. If you take Sacrifice of the Just, it's only a 1 minute cooldown. It lets you eat 30% of the damage being thrown at them for the next 12 seconds, which is extremely powerful for dealing with dangerous mechanics in Mythic Plus dungeons, especially if your healer is having any sort of struggles at all. You also have Blessing of Protection, which you can use to clear bleeds from yourself or to protect other players from all physical damage. It will set the target's threat to 0 while it's active, so it's great for protecting players who are fixated or bled or dealing with some sort of mechanic, but not generally something you want to use on yourself while you're tanking most of the time. The main use for Blessing of Protection for me is to clear debuffs, specifically bleeds. To do that, it is really important to have a Cancel Aura macro, and it needs to go like this. I'll throw it on the screen right now. /Cancel Aura Blessing of Protection, /Cancel Aura Divine Shield. You want to have both of those in the same macro in separate lines, and that way you can use that macro to clear a debuff and then quickly remove it without letting anyone else get auto-attacked while you have Blessing of Protection on you. You also have Blessing of Spell Warding, which makes the target immune to spell damage and prevents magic effects from being applied to the target. Unlike Blessing of Protection, it cannot be used to clear magic debuffs that are already present, but it will make that target immune to damage. Magic damage, that is. So it has to be precast to immune initial applications of debuffs, that sort of thing. It also doesn't zero out the target's threat, so you can use it on yourself and continue tanking, and it's an extremely strong cooldown that can simplify a ton of dangerous situations in dungeons. And it also shares a cooldown with Blessing of Protection. If I had to say which of the two is more useful, I think Spell Warding is definitely more, I mean, it's certainly more unique. Prot Pally is the only spec in the game that has Spell Warding, and the other two Paladin specs do have Bop. But Spell Warding also is just kind of, I think, generally more useful, but they're both really good to have. You have Lay on Hands as well, which is a pretty self-explanatory skill. It's an instant full heal. You use it on yourself or other players to prevent a death, and that is pretty much all it's for. And finally, you have Divine Shield, the ultimate cooldown. Thanks to Resolute Defender, it is a mere 2.5 minute cooldown at worst, and you're completely immune to damage while it's active. Due to Final Stand, you also AoE taunt throughout its duration. This is an absolutely insane defensive cooldown. You're effectively immune to everything, but you still hold threat the whole time, and it's only 2.5 minutes as the average cooldown. Absurd. It's powerful, easy to use, super reliable. A cat could step onto your keyboard and be able to do the job of a tank while walking away for 8 seconds. Easily the strongest cooldown in the game ever, and it's up all the time. Absolutely crazy. I don't understand how Paladins keep getting away with this. They're overpowered. I mean, we're overpowered, and no one seems to notice or care, but since I play Paladin now, I guess that's just cool. I love it. Alright, now let's talk about how to pull on a Protection Paladin. This is something I always specifically go over because I know that pulling packs of mobs in dungeons is challenging for newer players. You can precast Blessed Hammer to generate some holy power before the pull, and this will allow you to use Shield of the Righteous as soon as you're in melee range. This is also something you want to do at the start of dungeon timers. You can only carry 1 holy power into a dungeon, but you can carry some Shield of the Righteous buff up time, so generally speaking, as the timer is counting down to open up the fog gate and let you in, you'll want to build up holy power and cast Shield of the Righteous, and then walk into the dungeon with an active Shield of the Righteous and 1 holy power up. This isn't always true for every dungeon. You know, it's a Taldazar, you're going to get on a mountain ride down to the boss. You don't need Shield of the Righteous up for that, but if you're pulling in the first couple seconds and you can roll in with 10 seconds of Shield of the Righteous and 1 holy power, you might as well. In terms of pulling, once you are making a pull, you want to open by throwing in Avenger's Shield to establish AoE threat. Then depending on your cooldowns, things can branch out a bit. Your main goals are to get Shield of the Righteous active and Consecration down. That's what you're going for. If you have Sentinel or Eye of Tyr available, those help a lot with establishing the initial threat grab. If not, Ardent Defender can at least give you an extra layer of tankiness while you're using Judgment to generate the holy power needed to keep casting Shield of the Righteous. Using some sort of cooldown at the start of a pull is usually a good idea, if not for the threat generation, then for the defensive value when enemies are at their most dangerous. Might I encourage you to use Divine Shield in the first handful of seconds of a pull? If it's not going that well, Divine Shield is always a great fallback tool to just go ahead and hit that. You've locked threat down now while it's still a little tenuous, and then you can just get your health back up whenever you feel comfortable doing that. In general, it's pretty simple. Avenger Shield really does most of the heavy lifting when it comes to establishing AoE threat, and Shield of the Righteous is right there to pick up the rest of the slack. In terms of stats, Paladins want to enchant and gem for haste. Mastery is your second best secondary stat due to how it increases your block chance, which works very well against auto attacks and spell damage over time thanks to Holy Shield. Strength is very valuable, so whenever possible, your main goal is to maximize your item level, but when you're comparing comparable pieces or you're thinking about crafting pieces of gear and what secondary stats to put on it or making gems, you'll want to go with Haste Mastery. Prop Paladin is insanely strong right now. I mained it in this raid tier and I hate to say it, but I've really been enjoying it in Mythic Plus Season 3. It is an excellent tank in both raids and Mythic Plus, and it's probably the only tank that has that distinction of being consistently top tier in both ends of the high level endgame season after season after season. Its value in raids has fluctuated at times throughout the years, like quite a bit, but it has been good for all of Dragonflight's raids, even Vault of the Incarnates, and it has been good for all of Dragonflight's Mythic Plus seasons. It's probably the best tank of the expansion if you zoom out and look at all of Dragonflight. Vengeance Demon Hunter is undeniably the better Mythic Plus tank right now. It's the flavor of the moment and it tastes great, but Paladin is extremely competitive. By playing Paladin, you sacrifice Demon Hunter's personal damage and defensive power to provide more group utility. I like that trade-off. That's insane to hear myself say, but it's true. The group utility you provide is absolutely bananas. Despite a lot of predictions of nerfs, Vengeance Demon Hunter has continued to remain the strongest tank in the game in Mythic Plus, but Paladin is nipping at their heels and it is amazingly powerful in raids as well, so you really cannot go wrong playing one. With the return of the Season 1 tier set bonus in Season 4, Prop Paladin is going to be every bit as strong in Mythic Plus and a lot more fun to play, I think, in the future, so things are looking even better going forward than they currently do now, and they're already really good now. Alright, that is it. Thanks for watching. Bye.